Hey, everybody, and welcome to Global Resources for Men. I'm your host, Elysia Buss, and tonight we have the amazing Adam Stanecki coming to us from Australia, one of my favorite places out there. He has the Dad Dojo. He is a men's coach and founder of Man Alive. He does so many cool things: breathwork, NLP, martial arts, a fantastic father and husband. And we are excited to have him on here for just a beautiful rambling conversation of how we can help other people, as well as self-care for men and how to let go of your ego and, have conversations where you don't need to be right. So something I feel like we can all learn from regardless of our gender. Adam, thank you for being with us here today.
Elysia, thank you again. And we've got Zach in the hot seat for a little while at least. So this
Yes.
All right.
So
and
good.
just before we press record, the question was about how to get into breath work, right, Zach? That's what we were talking about.
Yes. How to get into breath work.
Yeah, so I get to say my favorite 3 words with that one, which is shut your mouth. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. So my son's school, which is primary all the way through to secondary, so it's like a joint school. I was invited in to talk to the teachers. So it's about 45 teachers all sat in a circle, and they do this beautiful kumbaya moment where they sit down and they settle themselves. And then they say, Adam's going to speak about breath work. And I just stood up and I said, shut your mouths, which is something I've wanted to say to teachers all my life, because that's all they ever did to me when I was at school. So I got to tick a box off my bucket list where I got to feed it back to all of the teachers all at once. And then I just felt settled after that. But in all seriousness, a lot of breath work, when you look at Wim Hof, which is really popular now and should be holotropic breath work, rebirthing, you name it. Like there's 1,000 different types of breathing. Pranayama, a lot of it doesn't speak about, well, pranayama does, but you've got to get into the weeds to find it. They don't speak about the mechanism that you use to breathe. Now, your nose is made for breathing, your mouth's made for eating and talking. So if you can think of it that way, it reminds you to keep your mouth shut. And when you keep your mouth shut, you get more efficiency of breathing from a respiratory and physiological point of view. And I'm not going to get into the nerdy, geeky stuff because I'll get excited. You'll both go walk off, get yourself a cup of tea or a beer or something and not be paying attention
Ready.
anymore. Yeah. Ready to zone out. So honestly, the best thing that you can do is shut your mouth. And what's good about that is you stop getting in trouble with your spouse, your kids, your dog, your boss, because you don't speak as much. And you become the most popular person in the room because you're listening to everyone else talk about themselves. So we were talking about ego. You get into like a dinner party situation or a meeting at work, God forbid. I used to hate meetings at work. And if you just shut your mouth and listen and feedback what other people are saying about themselves, you're already in. You're starting to become the most popular person in the room. Meanwhile, you're breathing really well. And when you breathe through your nose, you're more calm. Because if you think about it this way, if you're being chased by a lion, are you breathing through your mouth or your nose? You don't breathe through your nose, right? You're breathing through your mouth because you need to get the big ones in, right? So when you breathe through your mouth, your body makes the assumption that you're in a stressful situation. But when you didn't get eaten by the lion because you were faster than your mate Joe, and Joe went down and you're okay, you can just go and sit, in your little cave and you'll be breathing and breathe through your nose, and then your body knows you're relaxed. So the best way to start breath work, if you don't have a practice or a protocol, is just to breathe through your nose. Really nice and easy. And my favorite thing that I give to so I get guys that come in whose hair's on fire because they're like anxious or overwhelmed or whatever, when they'll come and see me for a one-on-one coaching session. I get them to lie down on the floor. I'm looking for a cushion around me and I don't have one. Get a little cushion or a pillow, put it on the belly, close the mouth, close their eyes, breathe through the nose. And as you breathe in, the belly and the pillow or the cushion lift up. And as you relax, it drops down. And if you make your awareness solely on the cushion, it doesn't become an exercise of breathing right or wrong. It just becomes an exercise of witnessing the cushion lift up and down. And there's a whole heap of metaphysical and physical stuff going on there that just calms you right down. Your nervous system chills out. I've had people fall asleep. They're like, I'm an insomniac. I can't sleep. And their session is them sleeping for 5 minutes, right? And I'm like, I win. Give me all the money. You haven't slept for 3 weeks.
I mean, that's what I need 90% of the time, sleep. So I get it.
All right. So let's stay on that one. I kid you not. If you do 20 minutes a day I call it pillow breathing. I didn't come up with the name. I'm sure I saw it referenced somewhere. I've not seen it called anything. There's probably some beautiful Indian, like Sanskrit name for it that I don't know. But if you just lie on your back, don't do it on your bed unless your goal is to fall asleep for the night, right? But a formal practice where you're lying on a yoga mat, something, I mean, I've got concrete floors here, so if I lie on that, it's pretty hardcore, kind of stoic practice. So like a yoga mat, maybe a bolster under your knees if you get lower back pain, because you want to be comfortable. No pillow under your head, so your neck's completely straight. Your hands are out at your side, palms up, like Vitruvian Man, like the old Da Vinci thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the position is Shavasana, which is a corpse pose. And then you put a belly or a book or something that's got a little bit of weight on your belly, maybe between the bottom of your rib cage and your navel, somewhere around there. And as you breathe in, if you really, really focus and your goal is to witness the pillow moving, your breath becomes deeper. So you stop breathing up here. And again, if we go back to the analogy of being chased by a tiger or a lion, when you breathe, it's stressful breathing. Calm breathing is through the nose into the belly. But instead of getting all wound up in your head that's already overwhelmed and not letting you sleep by what are the mechanics of breathing properly? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? What should I do? Oh my God, I'm terrible at this. All of your attention goes to the pillow, to the cushion, to the book, whatever that object is. And you just chill out and have a nice moment witnessing the pillow go up and down. 20 minutes a day, you'll sleep better it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks, or you might just fall asleep straight away like old mate did on the floor here once.
Fair enough.
So that's the easiest entry in. I think one of the biggest difficulties, Zach, with breath work, and I don't know if it's a marketing ploy, I don't want to be that negative about it, is people make it more difficult than it is, or at least seem to be more difficult than it is. I don't want to assume that that's to make more money out of it, because it is complicated when you get into the technicalities, but entering it shouldn't be complicated. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You have any more questions, Zach?
Currently I do not. I actually have to get off the call real quick. I will be back though, okay?
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds
All right,
good. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers, Zach.
Yeah, so perfect. We got to jump into that a little bit. I'm always
Breath work.
interested in breath work. I've been a shallow breather due to stress for far too long. And so I've been joking that I need to go do a breath work training just so that I can breathe better for myself.
It's weird, right? And it's a vicious cycle. So you get stressed and then you breathe in a stressed fashion, and then your body says you're stressed, so you stay stressed, and then you keep breathing in a stressed fashion. Now, what's really interesting is there are two options there. You either change what your body's doing, or you work out how to not be stressed. Now, which one of those is easier, right? Like change your breathing or try and unpack all of the reasons that you are stressed. This is why I go through breath, because it's the easier, faster, more immediate way to change. Or else you're sitting in therapy for the next 20 years, unpacking all of the stuff that led to you being anxious in this moment right now. But to do that, you have to find mental space to process it, but your head's already full. So then you have to go and find an activity which adds to the mental load, and then it doesn't work. Like I see this all the time. Psychologists approach it, and I'm not having a go at the psychological community at all. They approach anxiety in a very formulaic way where they try and do processes before the person's calm enough to do anything. And in a more positive note, there are some psychologists now who, when someone comes in, they'll just say, let's breathe for a moment. It's not even practice. It's just like the focusing on the breathing. And then all of a sudden you're connected to your body. You're not stuck in your head, even without any kind of formal practice. And it allows you to calm down, because a lot of these people who come in with that, in that situation, maybe yourself, you're not even aware of what your breathing's doing. So it reconnects you to like your physical existence And then you can go, oh, okay, now let's try and unpack our thing. We're not going to fix all of it today. Let's fix our thing. Now you can do that with by yourself, or you can do that with a practitioner in a group. Might be while you're talking to friends.
Yeah. No, I love that. Another thing that we don't talk about very often, and since I've been a medical massage therapist for 22 years, like this is an interesting piece as well. So we have fascia, which is a connective tissue that wraps around every cell, muscle, bone, organ in our bodies, etc. When we have surgeries, micro tears, like from overstress, working out, like tightening our muscles and our muscles fatigue, which creates like those little micro tears, that can also happen in our abdomen. And so when we breathe, our organs are supposed to basically be able to slide over each other, which a lot of people don't realize. And so when you have difficulty with that breathing in those organs, like your diaphragm, which is underneath your rib cage for people who don't know, it expands and contracts as you're breathing. And then you can have pain that results in different areas of the body. So for instance, a person could have fascial restrictions in their organs, and that could create sciatic pain. So there's a technique through massage called visceral manipulation, and people can go to Upledger Institute to find a practitioner for that in their area. But that we're releasing the fascia and the diaphragm and your different organs can also help to have better breathing patterns. And for people, if you want more incentive to be able to breathe in a better fashion, especially for the ladies out there. So with our pelvic floor, it's connected to our diaphragm. We have multiple diaphragms. We have a diaphragm in our throat, diaphragm that we all hear of, every diaphragm, and then diaphragm in the pelvic floor. And so having better orgasms also is connected to having release in the different diaphragms. And so sometimes, like when we're having trouble because we don't have our voice, literally, like and figuratively, because we're not sharing our feelings, that can actually impact the kinds of orgasms that we're having. Obviously, men also have our literal diaphragm in our throat, so their orgasms can also be impacted by not breathing in a healthy fashion if they're breathing too shallow and don't have that.
Yeah, it's I did a whole lot of well, this is not going to be surprising to anyone listening, is that I did a whole heap of research on how breathing and sex relate. Excuse me. You know, being a man interested in sex. So everything that you spoke about is really quite interesting when you start to look at the fact that the common, I would say, misconception is ejaculation and orgasm are the same thing for a man. Now, the men who understand this will be like, and the men who don't will be like, what the fuck? They're not the same thing. You can orgasm without ejaculating. Now, what does that require? That requires a certain understanding of how your equipment works. Breathing is involved, muscular control is involved, an understanding of the flow of energy. Oh, well, let's say energy. Might sound a little bit woo-woo, but that's probably the best word to use. And again, you're talking about pelvic floor for women, then that kind of control for men is also important.
Yeah,
so we start to talk about prostate health, internal organ health,
which we'll be talking about next week.
Yeah, and
or
all
2
the
weeks from
fun
now.
stuff comes, it comes after that, right? So if we pull it back to breathing, there's so much that you can do to breathe. Like when you breathe deep, we were talking earlier about the pillow breathing, it starts to draw the breath deeper. The diaphragm, the diaphragm under the lungs moves.
Yeah.
As it moves, it massages the organs in the lower abdomen. Increases blood flow, lymphatic drainage and movement, muscular tone. Like I've seen so many people who are like amazing athletes and they can't breathe into their bellies. It's just all locked.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, let's unlock that. And so then it becomes this, you can see on their faces, they're trying to like figure out what signal do I send to that part of my body to release it. And then once you get that control, you move down. So what I found in my practice, because I used to do massage as well, studied Chinese medicine, and I used to own a gym. So all of the things with how the body works and the stuff and the you know what is I would either go downwards, so from diaphragm down, working down to the pelvic floor, or I'd work upwards, depending on what kind of awareness people had of their body.
Sure.
And when it came to heavy lifting, what I heard most coaches talk about was trying to create a brace around the midsection, as if like squeezing your body would work, but then people would bend forward.
Yeah.
What I learned were the best cues were like drawing upwards through the
Yeah.
pelvic floor, and everything kind of.
That's what they tell us in pelvic floor physical therapy. It's like you're zipping up from your pubic bone.
Well, I walked into a gym one day and there was a young gentleman who was trying to lift what would have been his personal record, his personal best, deadlift. Couldn't get it off the floor no matter what he tried. And I said to the coaches, would you mind if I just give him one cue? Because they want to step on their toes and make them look like idiots as if they didn't know. And they're like, yeah, go for it. We can't work it out. So I just said to him, I want you to pull your balls up. And so he giggled for about 3 minutes, as you would in a gym when you're trying to lift heavy weight and someone talks about your balls. And then I said, no, look, I'm serious. Like, lock yourself into position as you normally would to lift it, pull your balls up, and then push the floor away with your feet. Bar went up, and he almost fell over because he'd lifted it so fast. Didn't know what he'd done. So then we like sit down in a circle to try and work out what's going on. I'm just explaining how everything just kind of tightened up for him. So then the two coaches are like, I don't know how we're going to employ that particular cue in a class scenario, but it works. Clearly it works, and some people come to that understanding naturally, but others need to be like, this is where you need to draw that from. And like in pranayama, which we were talking about earlier, there are breathing exercises which are almost about the way it's talked about in a flowery kind of language is drawing the breath through the sexual area.
Mm-hmm.
Which is impossible, of course. You can't breathe through there because the anatomy doesn't work that way. But just that thought process of breathing through a certain area of your body.
I was just laughing about a terrible joke because, like, guys going down on women, they're like, yeah, we definitely can't breathe down there. Like,
yes, no, it's too hard. It's definitely too hard. It's too much to think about. Am I getting it right? Why isn't she making any noises? Oh no, what was I doing? I lost my place.
yeah, she moves and you're like, it just took me 20 minutes to find that spot.
Far too many jokes. I just found it. Why did you move?
Yeah, it's so funny. And people talk about Kegels a lot too, and Kegels are great, except for like when I was talking to my pelvic floor physical therapist, is that you can actually do too many Kegels and creating increased tone. That's just so you have too much tightness and not enough strength, which might sound strange to people. You're like, how does that work?
Think about tight hamstrings and strong hamstrings, right? It needs to be
balanced. Yeah.
Too much flexibility is kind of laxity. You don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. And so just being able to understand that, like, oh, like maybe I'm having pain with sex, or maybe I'm having difficulty like having an erection, and be like, well, maybe it's coming from having too much tightness in your pelvic floor, and understanding like what that looks like to be able to massage and to just like engage with that, and when to get support from a pelvic floor physical therapist and be guided in that, and not be embarrassed by internal work, even if you have a female like physical therapist for pelvic floor, because sometimes that work needs to be done anally, and like it's not a sexual thing at all. It's like you have a lot of muscles that are tight down there, and a lot of people, they grip like when they're lifting and whatnot in their low back, and then they're recruiting from the pelvic floor when they have different weaknesses, and then that impacts. And like, man, you guys, if you realized how much your sex life was impacted by poor lifting and not like being willing to go to a pelvic floor physical therapist to maybe get the support that you need, like maybe you would change your mind, because who doesn't like to have better sex and orgasms and lift better, clearly, from what Adam's saying. Pull up your balls, gentlemen.
Stronger in gym, better in bed. I've got one of my coaches is a tantrika. So he teaches, amazing. Like just, modern day man, beautiful human being, old school ancient tantra. Not let's go into a room together, turn the lights down, get our gear off. Like not that kind of stuff, like proper energy work.
Beautiful.
And a lot of men go to him who have erectile dysfunction.
Nice.
And ultimately the work for them is just learning to relax.
Yeah.
So much tension. So, in a tantric kind of sense, you're talking about this, the energy's blocked. If we talk about it in more of a medical way, the blood can't flow, the muscles are too tense. Now, clearly,
it's crazy.
Clearly you want, there are some muscles you want to be strong, but for them to get to that point of rigidity, everything else needs to relax a little bit. And so,
It's
but that
true.
comes from here.
Yeah,
Mostly
you have
that
to
comes
get
from
out of your head and into your body. And it's like the same thing for women who are taking longer to be able to orgasm. Like they're too in their head oftentimes and
oh, of
not enough
course,
in their
of course.
bodies. And then like they're fighting so much, like tightening up their muscles, like trying to get there. But and it's counterintuitive that like, no, like don't like fight for it, relax into it.
Exactly.
And that goes for like both genders, really.
Yeah, and I think it also leads to this idea. We're going down a rabbit hole here, and it's a brilliant one. But like the idea that sexual relationship has to be about penetration.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like intimacy and yeah, all those things.
And this is just and this becomes interesting. And I love how these discussions kind of come around full circle. And then, and in terms of this, I mean full circle about what we were originally going to be talking
Yes,
about today, which
indeed.
was like, it's this idea of black and white. And we were talking about beforehand when we were talking about what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about like arguments and right and wrong and ego. But this is
Indeed.
the same thing. Like this idea that a particular activity must involve and must result in. And if it doesn't, then I have somehow done something wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like right, wrong again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how are you going to, if we're talking about sex, how are you going to relax into that activity if you have all of this mental load? And it's just there, and that this is what's great about these rabbit holes is that's about everything. So how do you have a true intimate relationship if you're in your head all the time thinking about all of the boxes that you need to tick to make a relationship work?
Yeah, doing mental gymnastics really, especially like if you have body insecurity or like you're just not like present or there was a fight or like you have to just you're too much in your head. And sometimes that means that somebody is maybe even like fantasizing about somebody else because that's what they need to do to create that bridge of being able to be present. And I feel like that's not a conversation that we have very often because there's so much judgment attached to it
Yeah.
instead of just being like, okay, well, that's not what I want in my relationship. What do I need to bring to the table to transform that, to create a safe space for conversation, to let go of that expectation, to let go of that performance idea, right? And be like, well, maybe penetration is not what is best for this moment. Maybe like it's more like nurturing in this moment and just being held and caressed or whatever validation that needs to happen between two people in an authentic fashion.
But I had a amazing discussion with a man, same age as me. So I'm 47, so we're the same age. And we were talking about intimate relationship and sex. And he said, my 20-something self would probably punch me in the face if I said this. But he said, if you gave me a binary, I had to make a binary decision between what I could have for the rest of my life, whether that would be cuddles and intimacy, like just holding, or penetrative sex. He said, it's not even a discussion. I'll have the cuddles.
Yeah.
And I said to him, thank God I'm not the only one. Like, and
Yeah.
there's this massive misconception about what men want,
Right.
which is almost the polar opposite to what they really want. It's amazing. Like I've talked to so many men who just want intimate connection.
Yeah. No, me too.
That's
Like it's really astounding. Like having been doing men's work for the last 5 years and talking to men all over the world, I bring this conversation up often in regards to nurturing. And men, I think people all over the world, regardless of gender identification, are just starved for intimacy, nurturing, and connection. But so many people are over sexualized and undersexed
oh
that
yeah.
when you have any kind of touch at all, it immediately like flips them into like, oh my gosh, I need sex. But my brain thinks that it's like, I need nurturing. I want sex. Society tells me I need sex, but nobody models the conversation of articulating our needs for intimacy, what nurturing is, and let alone nurturing between men. Like, how do men nurture men in a non-sexual fashion
Mm.
that doesn't make them feel like awkward or weird? Just like at some point, I joke with my girlfriends. I'm like, when did we stop getting to have slumber parties?
Yes.
When do we stop getting to just like have slumber parties and play with each other's hair and like cuddle and like just be silly? I told my friends that that's what camping is for men. Like you guys go out into the woods and you camp. Like you're not cuddling most likely, right? But that's your collection.
But think of where men do have that physical contact with other men in a safe environment.
Grappling, like jujitsu.
Yeah, it's sport, right? So
Right.
uh, American football, Australian football, rugby. You don't get it in soccer because if anyone touches you, you fall over and you scream for your mum. Wrestling, like wrestling's big in the States, right? All those
Yeah.
guys that like men with men being sweaty in close contact. And that's okay. It's a safe space to do that.
Yeah.
Like
Because
my
there's
outlet.
that aggression though, that's like supposedly with it, right? Like those are
Yeah, true.
considered hyper masculine sports typically versus like a softness and just beingness. So for instance, like when is it okay to like give your mate a hug? Like when somebody
All the time.
dies?
No, I'm an overhugger. So I'm on the
No,
other side of the spectrum.
like a long hug, not like a hug, but like you're like, no, I do the long hugs too.
Yeah. I'm in for the long hug. Stop going away.
You're
No,
like,
no,
let's
come
make
up
it
here.
awkward.
That's all right. It's all right. It
I
is
tell people all the
it,
time, I want to give octopus
it's my phone in
hugs.
my pocket. It's fine. Let's keep hugging. That's true, but it's what's strange is you can tell when another man is like kind of weirded out by even the concept of it. Like there are some men that it's like you'll get a handshake and that's it. That's as close as you get. Palm to palm contact, almost too much. I have guys that just do knuckles now. Like they won't even handshake. I don't know if that's a post-COVID thing but I've noticed it more since that, maybe. But that could be
Interesting.
my own kind of perception. Then there's the handshake. Then there's the kind of bro hug where you go like this, but your arms in between. So you're not really making contact and you've got a one arm hug with this here. They're all kind of,
Interesting.
they're not hugs. And then you've got the, get right in, heart to heart, hug it out. But some of that sometimes it's like 3 pats in the back and out you get.
That's my
That was,
that's my stepdad. That's my dad, and it's weird for me to call him my stepdad, but um he's never been a hugger. Like he's like like he loves me and like as his daughter, and like it'd be like the kind of hug, couple pats. That's usually all I'd get. But my
yeah.
biological dad like gives me full hugs, and my mom and I are super huggy, and like I've always been a super affectionate person. But it's been interesting um just to have different people. And like as a massage therapist, every once in a while you run across a person who has sensory processing things and they don't like being touched, or they've experienced trauma and they don't like being touched, and like absolutely like honoring those people and not pushing on them at all. But they're actually the small percentage. And I think that sometimes people come in for massage just because they need that touch. It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily just because they're in pain. They're just like, I just need connection in a way that is
Absolutely.
ethical, that I don't have to worry about. Because wherever you go, people, like it should be an ethical establishment that doesn't have anything sexual connected to it.
No, and like touching on that for a moment, like I've talked to men who go to those establishments that are less than ethical,
Mm,
because they have desired the contact more than the sexual release. And
mm,
the shame comes with the sexual part, not the actual physical contact part. So it's this
interesting.
really weird dilemma, like people get themselves tied up in because they've got the two things connected where they don't need to be.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that discussion I was having with the man that I talked about, how it doesn't have to be sex. We just want intimate contact.
Yeah, it's
And
been an interesting conversation with me attempting to date these days, because I'll talk to men and they're like, "Oh, are you interested in friends with benefits?" And I almost want to make a joke and be like, "Sure, the benefit is nurturing and intimacy, but not sex until I get to know you better." But if they don't get to have, that penetrative sex right off the bat, oftentimes they just disappear. And I know talking to
it's
other
such a
men, like they're
foreign concept to me.
yeah, they're just craving it, but they have no idea how to create that bridge and navigate it in conversation. So for you, if you had those men coming to you that were just like, this happened, I'm maybe interested in getting to do this, but I have no idea how to do it. Like, what would your advice be to those men?
Well, sorry, which part of our conversation are you asking about? I've
So there's
missed.
so many parts. Let's like
Yeah.
go to the most recent one. So like if a guy feels like he wants connection and nurturing, but it's never been modeled for him. He doesn't know how to articulate it. He doesn't know how to make that ask and hold the boundaries, because maybe a guy wants that nurturing and maybe he doesn't even want to have sex with a woman. Like you said, like with your friend, you're like, I just want cuddles and intimacy. I actually don't want penetrative sex, which I personally have also experienced with men that are just like, I don't want that. I just want cuddling. I'm like, great. Right. So what would your advice be on that particular point? Like, where do men
Oh,
start?
I mean, that's a really tough one. It's going to have to start with a conversation, unless you want to jump in the deep end and start randomly hugging people. You know,
Ask for consent.
yeah, with consent first. Go out, just stand on a street corner in the middle of some big city with a free hugs.
No, that's great. I love those people. Those people make me
Bam.
happy.
And you'll get some, but honestly, I mean, that might sound ridiculous, but there's an opportunity there, right? Because there are other people that want to be hugged.
Yeah.
If you're giving out free hugs, there'll be people that'll take it up. Consent's obviously given if someone comes to you to give you a hug, right?
Yes,
But
for
then
sure.
who are the people that you can have conversations with about that? That'd be my question. Like, I would say for the most part, there are enough people around them that they can have conversations with if they want to. It's the starting of the conversation. So, like, who's a friend or a colleague or someone that you can start to broach the subject with? Like, I am interested in this. Ask a friend who's married. What does intimacy look like in your relationship? Ask a friend who's got a partner or another, so how did that come to pass? Like, I've had this discussion with my wife many, many times about what our understandings are and how they differ in terms of intimacy, in terms of sexual relationship, in terms of support, in terms of like allowing time for each other. And we have different understandings. Like, I'm much more out in the world and my wife's much more internal. So a lot's going on inside for her. And I'm like, but I don't get to see that.
Yeah.
But sometimes me wanting all the time is too much for her. So we've got to find the spot, right? So it's a discourse. So what I would say to try and answer your question in as succinct a way as possible is you have to have the discourse with people. You have to investigate and find where your people are.
Yeah.
And there might be someone within the group who's just open to a hug. And then you get your hug. Or it might be you start wrestling or you start doing jiu-jitsu, and it doesn't sound like the most obvious way of getting intimacy, but there's physical contact with that. And then your group of people starts to get bigger. So you're exposed to more people. Even conversations like this where people can come on and have a discussion and get ideas and connect with people. Like, almost 10 years ago, I joined a men's group that had a formal process and then became a looser connection and regular sort of fortnightly meetings. And that developed into, at the start and at the end of every meeting, every man has a big long hug. But it wasn't anything that was ever part of the rules. It just kind of developed. And I would say for some of the men, some of the time, that's the only intimacy they get in that fortnight.
Yeah.
Because some of them are not estranged from their kids, but they, will see their children every now and then because of whatever arrangement they have with their former partner. They might not have a partner at the moment, or their partner might be off doing something else. Whereas me, I've got 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a wife. I can, like, one of the dogs has just come up here. I could pick her up now because she's 4 kilos and give her a hug if I wanted to, right? But she wouldn't be up for it. She'd be like, no, I'm sniffing stuff.
Well, I love that you had that conversation in regards to the discourse with your wife, because that brings up a really important point that I think that people struggle with is when you have 2 very different needs in a relationship. One person is less affectionate, the other person is more affectionate. They need more connection. And so how do you handle those conversations with care? Says, hey, I feel like I need more connection. How can I do that in a way that's respectful to you? Be that my relationships with men or women that are platonic, or for people in ethically non-monogamous relationships, could be sexual. But that's a tender space because a lot of people have insecurity, people have been abandoned, cheated on, whatever. And how would you recommend navigating that conversation so all parties can be respectful and have their needs met in an ethical way?
I'm going to answer this in a long-winded way. My dad told me once, this is on his 30th wedding anniversary of him and my mum. He said, mate, because he calls me mate all the time, mate, I think it takes 30 years to truly know someone. And I was like, wow. There's a gem from my dad. So number one, sometimes it takes time, right, to even be able to unpack that, especially if you're talking about your significant other that you are probably going to be with for a long time. In a less long-term relationship, maybe you just get on the front foot and ask the question straight out, but the longer you're with someone, and at least this is my experience, the more there is to unpack.
Right.
And so if something, I'll speak to this in how I'm approaching it at the moment, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's not
your
causing
courage.
yeah, but it's not causing arguments, which is important,
Yes, indeed.
is to ask if we can have a conversation about a particular topic. So whatever that topic is, can we discuss? Can we find a time that we will sit down? And it seems formal, but if I have found that if that space isn't created for a discussion that's important for me, my wife might not know that it's important for me, and it will likely come up at the end of the day when we've both been busy, we've gotten into bed, and I say something off the cuff, and we're both too tired to have a true discussion about it. So we end up going to sleep thinking about it, but we're too tired to have any discussion about it. Nothing gets resolved. So in a more formal way, creating a space for a discussion, but also asking, it's not so much for permission to have that conversation, but if the other person isn't coming to the party, you can't have the conversation.
Yeah, it's more about understanding the person that's in front of you and where they're at, like how much bandwidth they are than asking for permission, because you have a goal that you're trying to meet for one or both parties. So understanding, well, like, what's the best space for me to be able to be most likely to attain said goal?
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm finding, and it's only taking me almost 20 years with my partner to work out that is, and it doesn't work all the time. This is the important thing. I say to my wife, and this is not advice for her, but like, you have to be prepared to get it wrong. You have to be prepared to like have your partner say no, and that be okay, and you be able to get over that. I think that's a really important thing. Like if I say to my wife, I want to talk about this, and she says, no, I can't, like I don't have the bandwidth at the moment, I have to be able to shelve it. Because she hasn't said no, she said not now. And two distinctly different things.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. And then that's why it's so important for us to not have our partners as the only person for our mental health, for our outlets. Like if we need to vent from work or like whatever it is, you have depression, you're struggling with your anxiety. Like if they say, I don't have the bandwidth to support you right now, that doesn't mean that they don't want to support you necessarily in that moment. They just don't have it. And they probably already feel guilty that they can't be there for you. So instead of
Yeah.
like leaning in and giving them a hard time about it, be like, okay, like thanks for letting me know where you're at, what your boundaries are. I'm going to go over here and be that like your friend group, your counselor, your coach, like whoever it is to be able to direct that to is wonderful to have that self-awareness and respect for both yourself and your partner. Um,
Yeah. And those support networks, I think it's really important to have someone who's professional. So you
yeah,
can go to specifically, and often that requires an exchange of money, but you can have a definite discussion within that boundary, but also to have a less formal, like maybe a less formal mentor that can
yeah,
be more of just a kind of a discourse, a discussion back and forth. And also, I think for men to have a group of other men to sit in a circle with, to meet regularly, whatever the time frame is kind of irrelevant, but I would say like every couple of weeks or every month, to get different points of view. So I sit with 8 other men. Almost half are divorced or separated. The other half have families. Some have kids, some don't have, no, in fact, they all have kids, but they're at different ages. So I get varying points of view on life from all of them.
Yeah.
And it might not even be that I'm asking a question about something, but I can go, oh yeah, number one, I'm not mad. We're all going through the same stuff.
Right.
And if I want to ask a question, I can get all of these different points of view and draw from them. And like this is one of the reasons I started the Dad Dojo, was to get similar people together. Like they're all dads. So we talk about dad stuff. Sometimes we don't talk about dad stuff, but we're still dads doing stuff. So there's that role that's at the core of it, that we all get to discuss things that are related to our, being dad and doing something else.
Yeah.
And then you get to see things from a different perspective rather than, being locked in your own head, trying to work it out yourself. So I think these kind of things and avenues of investigation are important. There's so many Facebook groups now. And I'm not a Facebook fan, but I am a fan of the communities that have formed on Facebook.
Yeah.
So for men who
that.
are looking to answer these questions, I found a group the other day that had over 10,000 men in it. And some of the men, and what's beautiful about Facebook now is you can post anonymously. They'll write the most open-hearted, raw stuff that's happened to them and ask for support.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Hundreds of replies. Like, where are you? There'll be, I'm in this city, right? I can be there in 2 hours. Like stuff like that. It's crazy. Or at least, would you like to get on a call? So
Wonderful.
there are
Really happy to hear that.
Yeah, they're really cool. And there are opportunities, right, to have discussions, and we can, people can do this, Zoom, or, whatever else, and have a chat. My community is tiny. I've got like maybe less than 100 men in it at the moment, but literally there are 100x, 1,000x on that out there.
Yeah.
For men to get support. And it's true for women as well. Like I'm not in any women's groups. So I don't know, but they exist.
Yeah, my women's group, we have 550 women in it, I think, virtually. And then my local community we have almost 200 women in it. So
Perfect.
yeah, the men's group that we have here has almost 100. That's local. Then we have 342, I think, online. But it's beautiful to be able to just grow more and more communities. I love getting to hear that there's a group out there that has 10,000 men in there that are having these kinds of exchanges. That makes my heart so incredibly happy. And this really, I feel like it all comes together, right? Because this conversation was initially about self-care for men, right?
Yeah.
That was part of it. And so everything I feel like that we've covered today really has to do with self-care.
Definitely. And I think I've been trying to impress this upon the men that actually listen to me, which, maybe they're not that many, is that when you take care of yourself, you can then take care of your family. If you keep just crushing yourself, what kind of a position are you in to take care of your family? And I'm investigating this idea that being of service is really important to men, even if they want to rebel against the idea that I have to serve.
Sure.
I think there's something to that. I haven't worked out how best to articulate it, because I've mentioned it to a couple of men and they've really pushed back on it. But I think if you look historically, I don't mean in any kind of subservient fashion or any kind of slave fashion, but the joy in being of service. Like, you are in service to your family if you have a family. There's no two ways about that. Whether that service is just bringing home the bacon. You're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for other people. So there is some service there. Supporting your wife, that's providing service.
Like anytime we have a job, isn't that service? Just because we're getting paid for it doesn't make it not service.
Yeah. So it's just an interesting, I've just been toying around with that idea where a lot of people have been talking about know your why for, like a decade.
Yeah.
You need to have a purpose. And I think sometimes those ideas are so high level that they're hard to grasp for many people. Like, if you don't know your purpose, then how can you get a meaningful job and you'll feel, unfulfilled in your life? But what if, like, your purpose is just to take care of your family? What
Yeah.
if you're just to be of service to your family? And so that might mean getting a shit job that you don't enjoy, but you're still fulfilled because you're supporting your family. I'm not saying I'm right in this. It's just something I'm investigating. And I think in order to be of service, you have to be healthy. You have to be mentally resilient. You have to have support structures in place. You have to take care of yourself. So we're back to self-care. So that's kind of what I'm toying with. There's almost a philosophy for dads at the moment is, if we fall into the trap of resenting what we have to do as dads, we forget that ultimately we are serving. I think it was easier for people to understand this when religiosity was bigger in the world. They would understand this idea of service to God.
Sure.
But we're kind of in that part of our evolution as a species now that we're kind of pushing back against the idea of God. Again, I'm not making any judgment on that, whether it's right or wrong. But in terms of the idea of service, when I speak to people about being service, I think they feel like it's beneath. It's been,
That's so
and so we're back to ego.
interesting. Yeah. So we're back to ego. Yeah. Because I was thinking just even from the standpoint of owning a pet, because it's your responsibility to feed your pet and walk your pet and make sure like you take it to the vet when it's sick, and like you need to take care of yourself so that you're not working long hours that are too long and keeping your pet in a kennel, like, or that you're not well and you can't, care for them correctly because they're sentient beings and we're their caretakers. Right? And so you're
Mhm.
still in service of this being, and just because it's an animal doesn't mean that, like, it's less than. It's still a
No.
choice that you've made to bring it into
And
your life and makes it your responsibility.
yeah, and that service to that animal is beneficial to you. Like, it's not a
Exactly.
negative, right? To be like, oh, I have to go clean up
No.
dog shit again, right? No, that's part
Yeah.
of the agreement. And when I come home, this used to be true, but my dog has gotten so lazy lately that she doesn't even get up. They would be at the front door, the two little dogs. Like, we've got a little like cavoodle, Cavalier King Charles cross poodle, that's just
That's
like a little,
very cute.
4 kilo bundle of too much energy. And my dog's his big lumbering 30 kilo crossbreed mongrel. And she just looks at me now for a minute, Matt, and I'm not getting up. I'm not getting up. Classic. But they still, like, they've still got that intent that they're like, oh, I'm happy you're home.
Yeah,
Come over here
for
and
sure.
come over here and pat me. All right, I'll pat you. You're supposed to be coming over and nuzzling me, but I'll pat you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think there's something interesting there that we can almost remove ourselves from this need to find purpose and why and be striving, and we can just accept that we are in service to something that's greater than ourselves, whatever that is, and ourselves. And then that allows maybe not the removal of ego, but ego is not so big then.
Yeah.
So that big weight around the neck is somewhat diminished. And then all the other things we were talking about, maybe they start to fall into place. Like, I can have a discussion with my partner, with my children, with my dog. Like, honestly, if your ego is involved in your relationship with training a dog, then the dog's wrong, right? And you're right.
Yeah.
But the dog only wants to please you. You just have to work out how to communicate with the dog, and then the dog starts to do the right thing. You have a better relationship rather than you getting pissed off because the dog didn't do what it was told to do at this time when it's actually fighting its inherent nature. It wants to go and chase the bird, and you're like, stay.
Yeah.
And then 1 out of 100 times it moves and you get cranky. The dog didn't listen to you because it should, because you're the dog's master.
Yeah.
So it's all full circle. It's all related. This is what these discussions are about, and they're so beautiful for that exact reason, that we go down little pathways and we come back, we're talking about the same stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I was so interested in regards to letting go of the trap of needing to be right. And I know we're winding down on time, but I found that one of the key things that men and women oftentimes struggle with is this thing of, like, a woman talks about a problem And stereotypically, a man really wants to fix that problem
Oh yeah.
instead of just actively listening. And so what I've told people for years now is woman to woman, man to man, man to woman, doesn't matter. Be like, if somebody starts talking to you about something, I'm like, do you want me to listen and be a sounding board? Or do you want advice?
Yeah.
And I always clearly ask first to the best of my ability. I'm human. Sometimes I make a mistake and that unsolicited advice comes out. That I personally hate unsolicited advice. So I try really, really hard not to do that.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about ego, what would your advice be to men who are struggling with that impulse desire because it comes from a good place, right? Like of wanting to support and help to serve. And from being like, oh my gosh, like she won't let me tell her how to fix it, or she's being mad at me because I tried to help and I'm coming from a good space, but she's shutting me down. There's just like so much to unpack. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, number one, you answered it, because that's the big thing that I learned is with my wife, with my daughter, with my son. Do you want me to help you fix this, or do you want me to listen? That's the best question. Like, you've already answered that one for me, which is wonderful. So I would say to men, like, just understand, and this is, like we're talking in stereotypes here, but it's like it's 80%, it's 80-20, right? It's fairly true most of the time.
It's
And I think
stereotype for a reason.
yeah, you're exactly right. If you play the percentages, you are likely to be right. If you assume that your wife is coming to you to get it fixed because that's what you want to do, then you're making a false assumption.
Mm.
So I would say on the other side, like that your wife just wants you to listen for a bit and then ask, do you want help with this? Because I think what happens is men don't realize that sometimes, and this isn't mansplaining, I hate that term so much, but I think men don't realize that it can be belittling to come across with, I've got the solution that you haven't thought of.
Yeah.
And they don't mean to do that. And I don't mean to do that. I don't think I'm smarter than you. Maybe I have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe I can help. But I think sometimes you need the permission to offer that advice. And like in the men's group I'm in, one of the rules is you do not offer advice unless it's asked for.
Yeah.
Regardless of if you have the absolute best answer, stumm, don't say a thing. Now, I'd like to add something to it. If you are a woman going to your man and you know he's a fixer and you take a problem to him, yeah, if you are taking a problem to him and you assume that he's not going to try and fix it, you are setting yourself up for failure.
Yes.
So you might need to say, hey, honey, I want to talk to you about something. I just need you to listen for a moment. Don't say anything. Just be my sounding board. And then see how that goes. So I think part of this is a basic communication skills thing. Like we're wired a little differently.
Yeah.
But we can.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. There was a pause.
Yeah, no, there was a pause because my calendar just said it's time to speak to Elysia 2 hours later. So.
Oh, yes. Our many jokes of time zone issues.
Oh, I never get it right. I never get it right. So that was the delay. My calendar telling me I should be somewhere in an hour's time. But yeah, I think, like basic communications, get out in front of it. And again, playing the percentages, men, don't assume that your woman wants it fixed. Women, don't assume that your man's not going to try and fix it.
Yeah, like adding to that as well is that like while we're telling the women or whoever, whichever flip that is, talking to somebody that wants to vent and saying, hey, telling the person, like, I need you to just listen. I need you to I'm interested in your feedback. This can be very helpful with parents.
Oh yeah. See, I do this with my kids now. I've got a 13-year-old daughter, 15-year-old son. And I'm like, well, I'm 47. So I've got, I've got the experience. I actually went through this shit at school.
Yeah.
I never offer them advice. They do not want it.
No, and that's brilliant. And I love that you're respecting their process, giving them that autonomy to go through it and learn the things that they need to through their own lens. what I was going to say on the other side for myself was that we need to respect the people that are in front of us who are asking to listen, because that person is going through their own stuff and they may or may not have the bandwidth to listen to you, or to listen to you and not fix things. And I think
Yeah.
that's a conversation we don't have often enough either, to be like, hey, I'm in this space. Are you in the space to hear me and fight your impulse? Just like you said, hey, the dog has the impulse to go chase the bird, and the one time it moves is the time you're going to yell at it. Like your friend, your lover, your partner, in whatever combination of gender that is, they might usually be really good at listening to you and be able to like hold back from that impulse to fix or give advice or whatever it is. But that day might have been a really hard day for them. And that's the one time you don't have that conversation. Then you jump down their throat for doing the wrong thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just again, coming back down to that communication, letting go of ego, and also the self-care of communication, right? Like articulating your needs, your boundaries, saying like, this is what I need for me right now to help calm my nervous system, to help us have the best relationship. Because if I don't hold my boundaries as a form of self-care, then our relationship is going to degrade, and that is going to make things worse for me and probably you.
Yeah. The big one is, we've known this for thousands of years. All of the really smart teachers have always talked about the fact that you've got to let go of your own self-importance.
Yeah.
Your ego is the thing that is restricting a lot of this stuff working. And the way that you're going to just come across and project to other people is going to be detrimental to the relationship, to the discourse that you might have. It doesn't have to be in an intimate relationship. Any relationship at work, it's true. If you are egotistical at work, you're not going to get very far. You're just not.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big thing, and it's a hard one. And I think it might even be harder today because everyone's told how special they are over and over with social media. Now, I'm not saying anyone's not special,
Yeah.
but there is a balance there of your own self-worth, your sovereignty, your beliefs, your values, how you communicate those to the world. You don't need to do it from a place of ego.
Yeah. A place of grounded confidence and consistency, I feel, goes far more so. And that self-awareness, right? And being able to say no and hold it, and to be able to receive no and not be crushed through your ego, your expectations, like, right? Like honoring that person. And being resourceful, right? Like, okay, this person said no over here. How can I resource what I need from another place in an ethical fashion? How do I creatively solve this problem and trust myself, my worth, my ability to do that? Even if you take that initial hit, because, we're human and we're like, oh, disappointed or whatever. But then, do some breath work, pick yourself back up, and be like, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah, and honestly, that's not, we're giggling about it, but it's a really good place to start because you get wound up mental state that affects your nervous system, affects your whole body. The interrupt, as we talked about before, the quickest way to do it, rather than trying to unpack it mentally, is just to calm yourself down via your breathing. You can do that sitting down, lying down. You can go for a walk and breathe. I mean, this it might be a good place to end it.
Yeah, for sure.
I've just started running again,
I
which
saw
is
that.
it's masochistic in a certain way. It's definitely love hate, but there is a point. People talk about the runner's high. It's just unfortunate you have to go through the runner's low before you get to the runner's high. But what I have discovered is, it's for me, and I'm largely focused on breath because it's a big part of my work. That's what I've been focusing on, not the actual mechanics of running, but how I breathe when I run. And I've found that when I get to the point where it sucks, where maybe I'm running out of breath, my heart rate's too high, I'm going up a hill, I can actually calm myself down with my breathing.
Nice.
And then the state of the run, I feel a little bit better about it. I'm not setting the world on fire with any time, but I'm more relaxed. Therefore, my central nervous system's more relaxed. My muscles are only doing the work that they need to do. There's less tension in my body. So it's interesting, right? you can unlock so much potential with your breathing.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. So if people have more questions, Adam, where can they find you?
Probably the best place is on Facebook, really. Just because it's accessible for most people. So just first name, last name on Facebook, they'll be able to find me. And if you type in Dad Dojo and you're a dad, that's on Facebook as well.
Nice. Well, thank you for your flexibility, your candid nature, and your wisdom that you shared with us this evening. It's always wonderful to talk to you.
Thanks, Elysia. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. And for anybody watching in the future, we have Global Resources for Men, of course, on YouTube, which is where you're probably watching this, or globalresourcesformen.com. And we have our private men's group on Facebook for Global Resources for Men. Shocking. No. So until next time, we will see all of you later. Bye, guys.